Okay, in this video tutorial we'll be dealing with class arrays and the reading from a text file. The first item of this is actually creating an entity or a class, and this is the base class. We are creating we're a car salesman, and we've got a lot of cars that we are selling, and we've got a class to keep track of each individual vehicle. So in my vehicle I have attributes and fields to keep track of the make, model, number plate, ODO and year of that vehicle. So each vehicle that will enter our sales lot would be added into here. Let's create an instance will be created per a vehicle that goes in. Now you'll see that all the constructors are coded: the default, the fully parameterized, the partially parameterized, setters and getters, the two strings, as well as some additional methods. Now when we go on from there, if we wanted to create an instance of this class in our running area, we would say vehicle, so the class name, we could call it whatever we want. I'm just going to call it v1 is equal to new vehicle. Now the declaration part, as far as that is concerned, what that does when you declare an instance of a class is it literally in your RAM, if you take a look, I just represented RAM in Excel. If I created a RAM here, all I've done is I've created a pointer. So literally I've created a pointer v1. It is not actually pointing towards anything, nothing actually physically exists. All I've done is created a pointer, and that's the declaration. So now after the declaration we do an initializing, which you can do on the same line, which I'm sure most of you do, is we'll equal new vehicle, and we'll send through information. So for example, make, model, if I wanted to send through full details, I could send through Honda Civic whatever, and then the ODO, and then the year. Okay, the starts might not pertain exactly to what's gone, and basically what's it done now I've initialized vehicle by the constructor. When I go new vehicle, it's calling the constructor to create that instance in RAM. So now in your RAM what would happen is that vehicle, which it's similar to this one here anyway, would literally be created in RAM, and then this pointer would point towards that instance. So v1 is pointing towards that instance. So when you've declared a variable and initialized it as a class, you've now created a pointing towards that instance, and so forth. If you had more than just specifically one, you would obviously each pointer would point to it. Now in this scenario that's okay if you're dealing with one instance, but what if we, in this parking lot, we've got multiple vehicles that are in there? So we create an array in our working class, which is dealing with our parking lot. We create an array of vehicles. So we declare it by saying private vehicle vehicles is equal to new vehicle size 30. And basically all we've done there is we've created, instead of only one pointer, okay, we don't have anything initialized now. Let's take that away. Delete. Structure still there. Just clear it. Oh yeah. So we don't have anything specifically in there at the moment, but what we've done when we are now working here, we've just said declare 30 vehicles. So it's created 30 pointers, so we would have created position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So if we now drag that down, it would have created 0 to 29, which is 30 pointers. Doesn't like me. Ridge cells cannot be the same size. Okay. Okay, there's obviously something in one of these cells down here. Anyway, so I've created 30 pointers. When you create an array, you've literally created pointers to, and you've told it that the data type that it's going to point to is that, in which case it's going to be a class vehicle. And I've set there, and I've set num vehicles, and then in my constructor I've initially set it at 0. So what I've done is I've created an extra pointer towards num vehicles, and I've set that value of this specific variable to be 0. So currently it is pointing the pointer is pointing to this pointer over here. So num vehicles is 0, saying that this is where we are at. We are at 0 pointer. Now, the next thing I code, and I know we can actually ignore this for now, is I coded a method called add vehicles. Now the purpose of this method is you would receive through as a parameter the make, the model, the number plate, the ODO, the year. So you'll receive through all the details of the vehicle. You'll then instantiate a instance of the vehicle. So num vehicles, so wherever the pointer is, which is pointing at the new position in the array that the vehicle should be initialized at, and it will equal to a new vehicle, so call the fully parameterized constructor to initialize it. So what this step would do is, like previously, it will go and it will get that vehicle. In this case I'm just going to use this one. It's going to take it across into RAM. It's going to initialize, okay, well, with those fields it will initialize a position in RAM with those entries, and it would pointer number 0 will refer to that instance. So you'll see that pointer 0 now refers to that instance we just created with the parameters that we received. And the next step, it'll increment pointer plus plus. So all we've done there is we're now saying, okay, we are no longer pointing to position 0, we're pointing to position 1 in the array. And then again, if that same method is called, the next, using the parameters that were given, that were sent through, the next position will be initialized, and pointer 1 will point towards that instance created. So the next instance will be created, and so forth. So as it goes into it, it will initialize a new position in the array, and then increment the pointer down. Increment which position in the number of vehicles that have been initialized. So the number of vehicles keeps track of how many vehicles have been initialized, and this add vehicle method will add to the array. Now I'm just going to save all this. Now the next thing that we've got here is how do we initialize all these fields. Now sure, in a program you'll allow the users to be able to add vehicles, that kind of thing, but when you start up you would want a method of storing it, and we would store it in a text file, at least in at a school level and through exams and whatnot. So we are storing each vehicle in a text file. Now how do we retrieve items in a text file? Now the first item you have to identify with regards to a text file, or with dealing with the text file or any form of external input. The input, we have no general control over this file, because it could contain errors, or that input could be flawed. So with networking, it can throw an exception. Now what exception throwing is basically this potentially could cause the program to exit, and I'm sure you've all had a program just randomly terminate without any explanation, and that's because the exception has not been handled. The computer doesn't know how to proceed further from this point, and exception handling is handling this so that it can proceed further. Now to show you this, or where the use of it, to create to scan from a file, you would first need to create an instance of the file. So I'm going to say file f is equal to new file. Now remember, file is actually a class that isn't automatically imported, so we're going to have to control spacebar, and you need to import the java.io file class. You would then go f is equal to new file, so we're creating a new instance of the file. Now this string here represents the actual location. It's the string representation of the location compared to where your project base folder is. So I've got the text file directly in my project folder, and it's called vehicles.txt. So that is what I would code, is I'd simply say file is equal to new vehicles.txt. So far we've got no issues. We've created an instance of the file, and we've said there is a file, and it's taken on the properties of a file. But now we want to scan through that file, and this is where the problem comes into it, and we utilize the java.util class. And basically what the scanner does is it'll put what I call Bob in the actual text file. So this is my text vehicles.txt here, and it will actually put your cursor here so you can scan the context of it. So the scanner allows you to read what is contained inside this file. One of the ways. There are other ways, but the scanner is the easiest. So now we're going to say scanner java.util scanner scf, so scan file, is equal to new scanner. Now what this is going to do is you'll see there that it's got an option of scan file. If you look at the API documentation at the top here, it shows you that it throws a file not found exception, which means that this method is going to throw an exception, and you can code methods to throw an exception as well. So when you go like that and say scanner F, you'll see that it comes up with a red underline, and that's because this method throws an exception but we have not handled it. Now there's multiple ways of dealing with this. For one, before you coded, you could have just gone try control spacebar, try catch it, and coded it within there. Or now at a later, if you've already coded this and see this error, you can click on the unreported exception here and surround it with a try catch. Now from here in your catch statement, it does log it. You guys don't have to worry too much about that. You can utilize and keep the log file, but you would generally want to code a system.error.println to have an easy visual representation in your outbox here what the error was. You first would always want to state where the error occurred. In this case it occurred in my main test class error, and you would then include the ex.getMessage to display what the error, because remember, if there's an exception that happens here, it will not continue. Whatever code is here, it will not continue doing. If there was error here, it will catch it and deal with it over here. It will work down to the move down to the section which is to deal with that error. And I'm just going to print that message, and I'll also display something to the user with my show message dialog, and I'll display to a user something easier to understand, like sorry, file to read vehicles not found, or whatever, something more logical to a user and less perhaps detailed for the programmer. And this is how you would handle an exception thrown by this. To show you a little bit more detail on that, I can actually, in any class you create, for example in my vehicle class I coded a stupid method at the bottom which doesn't do anything, but I've says throws exception. So I've said that this method throws an exception, so wherever you called this you would have to deal with it. And technically as well, whenever you call it, you can just continue throwing. If a method throws you an exception, you can also throw the exception. And generally speaking, I like to handle my exceptions at my user interface level, because then I can display the message to the programmer as well as to the user without causing any issues of the working class being separate from the user interface. The next concept we're looking at here is we're going into the okay, so we've got this scanner and we showed you that the idea of throwing an exception. So now how does this work in practice? Well, sure, we've got the scanner in here, but now how do we actually read the text that's in there? So the scanner S file, the scanner for the file, is now put me into here, which is basically saying, okay, cool, I am going to be scanning this file and put the cursor there. Now the easiest way to work with this, like you can see the way this is a record, and then these are each individual fields. So that is the make, model, number plate, kilometers or ODO, which is the miles, the kilometers the car's done, and that's the year. And then it goes on to the next record and next record, so forth. Okay. Now, how are you going to deal with that? Is you're going to literally, I've got this up here so far, and this is how I've dealt with it. Now, what you'll notice is that I've got this scanner F, so I'm scanning the file, and the scanner throws an exception, but I've chosen not to deal with it here, so I've literally just thrown it on. And the way I did this is I literally, it had a red underline, I went to the light bulb and I said, oh, I don't want to deal with this right now, I'm not going to surround it with a try catch here, I'm literally just going to throw this error on. So now that I'm throwing on, so I've got some people here to see me, I've just got to pause this for a second. Okay, so the first thing, so all I did is I clicked on, so when the exception was not there, I don't remember where I was, you would simply go, instead of dealing with the chair, just simply throw it on, which means that I'm not handling a chair, I've just thrown it on to the next person's problem. So whoever now calls this method, it's their problem. Pass it on, pass the buck. So now that we've done that, we're scanning through the file, we are going to create a loop to carry on looping through the file until we are completely gone through the whole entire file, so it's going to carry on. Now realize without any of the code inside this would be a never-ending loop, because my cursor would be placed at the beginning, and it's basically this while has next is basically saying after Bob, I call the cursor this flashy thingy Bob. Is there anything after Bob? So saying while it has something after Bob, it's going to continue. It does not move the cursor, which is actually different to a database. In a database, when you go .next, it actually will move it as well as take it on. Anyway, now this line here, I'm basically saying string record is equal to scf.next line, and what that does is it takes the whole entire of that line and it puts it into, I'm just going to open up another notepad, and it puts it inside the variable record. So this notepad, this is obviously the vehicles.txt. This notepad here represents the actual record string. So I've taken the whole next line, which is also moved Bob, is taken the whole next line and returned it, and Bob is now on the next line. So inside my record, I've got all the details of that record. So now my string record has all the details I need. But now I want to separate it into its individual fields. So what I've done next is I've now created another scanner, and this scanner is another function that is available for scanner, and it can scan not just a file but also a string. So now we are going to be scanning this particular string, which is this individual record, and this scanner is going to use a delimiter sounds cooler, of a hash. So it is saying what a delimiter is what separates one field from the other. So the hashes separate each field. So what it is going to do is I'm saying you're using the hashes to separate one field from the next field. And in this case, the first field is make, so I say string make is equal to screcord.next, and what that'll do is it'll take everything up until the delimiter, which is a hash, and return that into the string and remove the character, sorry, Bob, after the delimiter. So literally stops at the delimiter, Bob will go over there, but Honda will be removed into my next notepad, which would be the actual, and Bob will then move over here. It would then happen the same. CBR would go into model, WNS231GP would go into number plates. Now the next one is ODO. You'll see that instead of using .next will return the next string. I've used .next int, which will read it as an integer. So it'll return numerical values after that. And then after that, I've now got all the values I need for this vehicle, or each that record. So I've called the add vehicle method, which I did explain a little earlier in this tutorial. And then that would initialize a new position in the array. So to go through it from this text file, literally what's going to happen is it's going to, so let's just try to keep this thing behind it. The first line of code is going to be captured. It's going to get that record, it's going to copy that, it's going to put it into the record. Record is then going to be taken across into each of its individual values. It is then going to run add new item. So literally what's going to happen is in my RAM, as it reads each code, let me just clear this. So to start from scratch, we'll start by pointing at pointer 0, and we would have nothing in RAM. Okay, and let me just get rid of all the merge fields. Now what we've got here is literally the first time it reads, it would read this record and get the Honda CBR like I just went through, and it would say is equal to new, so pointer 0, which would be this here, would then point to a new instance of which would contain the details from the text file. It would copy, it would create it here, and then it would increment num to 1. It would then go to the second point of the array, read this whole thing in, the whole record in. It will put it into the records variable. It would then scan through that and get the individual fields, so for example Hyundai, and then it would put it into here. It would then create an instance of that Hyundai. So now in 1 we would go across here, we would get the Hyundai. You would obviously, this would be initialized, the fields would be sent through, and then it would be added into here. And the same thing for position 2 now, because now this would be incremented to 2, and then same thing would happen for the last field. It will be taken from here and then put across to here. Or we read from the text file and then added into the RAM at that position, and all those pointers will be pointing there. And now we would have in total 3 items in there in the array. So the RAM has been initialized. The array contains that information from the text file because I have 3 items in my text file. Okay, I hope that helps explains that. Now the next component that we've got there is we now have initialized each of these positions. How would we loop through them? And now any sort of array manipulation, you need to loop through the array. And now instead of, you won't loop through the length of the array because not all positions, because this is, we've got, if you look at our RAM, we have 29 pointers. If I refer to position 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they're not going to point pointing towards anything. So we don't want to loop up to there. We want to loop up until num vehicles, because that is where the position stops. And you'll see, so then what I'll do is I'll say create my for loop, and a loop while I is less than the number of vehicles that are in the array, I plus plus. I then say s all equals vehicles position I dot toString. So it will return each position of the array dot toString. So it will position I when I is 0, it will return the toString of this instance. When it's 1, it will return the toString of this instance. When it's 2, it will return the toString of that instance. So we would loop through that. I'm going to delete this test class because I don't want it. And you'll see that I've already coded a little bit of a UE, very basic one. Which will literally ask the user to enter 1 to add a vehicle, 2 to print all, and 0 to exit. So when the user presses 2, it will call. So I've created an instance of my working. Now here's what's important. When in my constructor of my working, I didn't handle the exception. I literally threw it on. So what I've had to do is I've declared my working outside of my try catch, because otherwise I can only refer to it inside my try catch. So I've declared it outside my try catch. And when I get lower down, just give me a second. Now, sorry about that. What we've got here is we've got a. So now I've handled it over here. So I've encapsulated here the try catch. I haven't actually explained it correctly. So what I should do is also include the actual error message, so that we know what the actual error occurred, and we would also explain it to the user. So remember, nothing underneath nothing underneath working would execute unless it actually successfully executed. To show you this working now, I click play, it'll pop up with a frame that'll ask me what to do. If I click print all, it will then print me all the vehicles that are in my RAM to show me the details that are happening there. I hope this video has helped. Bye.